أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه أجمعين وقال الله تعالى الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. My dear respected brothers and sisters around the world watching this, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm your brother Akhlaaq, and I'd like to welcome you to the first session of a weekly session which has been put together by Al-Salam Institute in order that we can take benefit from the additional time many of us might have due to the current lockdown and isolation situation which we're all in around the UK, possibly around the world as well. And every day you during the week will be discussing a different topic. Some of them will be technical in nature, some of them will be a little bit light in nature, some of them might require you to have a pen and pencil, take some notes, some of them might require just to have a bit of a listen and see if you can learn anything. If you'd like to comment and discuss the ideas with us, then that'd be fine as well. So inshallah, this session over the next number of weeks, we're going to be looking at this idea of eloquence in the Quran. Now, we recognize that the Quran is not only the pinnacle of Arabic language, it's also the pinnacle of language, full stop. So nothing has been composed which is more eloquent in any language which has ever existed and will ever exist, which can match to the eloquence of the Quran in terms of its language, in terms of its style, in terms of the way it argues certain points, the way it discusses certain things in its consistency. But this idea of eloquence, what does that actually mean? I mean, we all understand the word eloquence. I mean, if you hear someone speak nicely, you'll say, oh, that person is so eloquent. But what does it actually mean if we try to break it down? And how would we defend that the Quran is eloquent? What kind of framework? What is our criterion for eloquence? How do we say this particular surah or chapter or language is eloquent because it fulfills X, Y, and Z conditions? Okay, but what are those conditions? How do we know what those conditions are? And can we use those same conditions for speech outside of the Quran? Just for normal language. And why is it so important for us to even be able to define things and characterize things? So we're going to be discussing these in sometimes in some details, sometimes in not so much details over the course of the next coming week. And Al-Salam has very kindly given me this half an hour slot every Monday where we're going to be looking at eloquence. And hopefully, inshallah, some of the ideas that we're going to discuss with you, for those of you who consider yourselves, lecturers and debaters and teachers and negotiators, a lot of these ideas might come very useful to you. How do you make your language powerful? How do you get people to listen to you, to understand what you're saying, to be convinced when you have a good argument? What methods can you use? And the Quran uses all of these methods in the best of ways. But what are these methods? We're going to talk about them. So, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Allamahul bayan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who taught mankind bayan, how to express himself clearly, how to speak clearly. Because if you look at the opposite end of the spectrum, who is it that can't express itself clearly? It's animals. Animals, they can't. They have very limited sounds, limited ranges of speech. They have limited expressions, and the way they interact with each other. Certainly, they have a certain level of communication, but they haven't been given the bayan that human beings have been given. And what is this bayan? That this way, if you reflect upon it, it's really quite amazing that you'll find people from up and down the UK. Okay, the words that they use are different. The body language they use is different. The expressions they use are different, but still somehow we all understand each other. And how is it that, even sometimes when most people don't say what they mean and they don't mean what they say, yet still we understand? And how is it that when people speak, we don't speak in literal expressions, we use metaphors, we use similes, we use metonymies, we use all sorts of different expressions, we use words outside of a context, we use complicated sentence constructions, and we understand each other. Everybody understands each other. It's very rarely people don't understand what anybody else is saying. And how is this possible? In fact, one person living at one end of the country and another person living at another end of the country, you bring them together, they will understand each other. How did this happen? And an amazing thing, and this is something which people, scientists can't understand, is how language develops in a child. A child of 1 or 2 years old, for those of you who've got young children, young nieces, nephews, sons and daughters, a child might have maybe 20 or 30 words in his vocabulary, but using those words is able to construct sentences and express himself or herself to you in a manner which is coherent and makes sense. Certainly there'll be mistakes in their grammar, and because of their limited words, they won't be able to express themselves. I mean, if you think about it, we have so many different words for very similar things, but a child might know one word for the same thing. Okay, I remember a young boy, very young boy, 2 years old, and whenever he would drop his elder sibling to school, he learned in his head that a building was called a school. So anywhere that he saw a building, he would just call it school. Okay, he'd see a house, he'd call it school. He'd see a train station, he'd call it school. He'd see, a factory, he'd call it school. Okay, he'd got in his head that school just meant building. Now, that was his understanding, and obviously a very limited understanding. However, what that goes to show us is that he was still trying to express himself, but his vocabulary was very limited. And how did that child learn how to do this? How did that development happen? Okay, and this development is taking place within every human being as they grow up and as they develop. And we speak with the words that we have, we speak with the expressions that we have, we speak with our body language, we speak with our intonation. All of these create bayan, they create speech. However, for us to be very, very clear in that speech, that requires a certain level of either talent or mohiba, some kind of skill set which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, or with some studying of the science of eloquence, we can improve our speech pattern. Now, one thing which is important, my brothers Fahim and Mahmoud, is that when we speak to whoever we speak to, one thing you'll notice is that your style in your language is always going to change, no matter what. It will always change, because the eloquent speaker is the one who will recognize his context and adjust his language and style to who his audience is. And the Quran does this perfectly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't speak to one person, He speaks to many, many people through the Quran, in His Quran. Who's He speaking to? Sometimes He speaks to the kuffar, non-believers. Sometimes He speaks to al-munafiqun, the hypocrites. Sometimes He speaks to Ahlul Kitab, the people of the book. Sometimes He directly addresses His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sometimes He addresses the Muslims. Now, when He's speaking to these different groups of people, sometimes He's addressing Fir'aun, sometimes He's addressing different people. When He's speaking to these people, is He going to speak the same way? Of course He's not. If you were to see your best friend, how would you speak to him? If you were to see your worst enemy, how would you speak to him? If you were to see your brother, how would you speak to him? And if to see your father, how would you speak to him? Your language is going to change. And it's important that we recognize this change in language. Otherwise, we'll misunderstand what's being said. I'll give you a very, very clear example. Okay? If I said to my friend who's sitting next to me in class, yeah, Muhammad, give me the pen. Okay? If I said to my student in the class, oh, Ahmed, hand in your homework, And then if I said to, let's say, for example, my father, oh, my father, uh, please give me the pen. Okay? Three different people here. Okay? Language is virtually the same. However, if we were to analyze those three sentences, they are all completely different. Why? Because the person who I'm speaking to is different in every context. So when you speak to someone like your father, someone who has authority over you, what am I doing? Even though I'm saying, give me the pen. أعطيني القلم. Okay, this is a amr. أعطيني القلم, give me the pen. I could be very rude and not say please, but I could say the same thing, give me the pen. Is that an order? Am I commanding my father? Of course not. You cannot command someone who has authority over you. So what are you doing? This is a dua. Okay? This is a dua. This is a request. This is an asking of a favor from someone. Like you would go to the king, or you go to the ruler, or you go to anyone who has authority over you. The language you might use is the same. However, this is not a command. You cannot command someone higher than you. You can only make a request. However, if I was to ask my friend, oh, Ahmed, give me the pen, am I commanding him? No, I'm not commanding him. I've got no authority over him. But at the same time, he's of the same level as me. So this is a favor. I'm asking him for a favor, and I'm asking him just to help me out. There's no command here. There's no consequence. However, now I go to my student in the class, Ahmed, give me the homework. Is this a dua? No. Is this a favor? No. What is this? This is a command. Because this is from higher to lower. The context now has changed from higher to lower. The authority has changed from higher to lower. So three things here now. We have number one, we have a dua. Number two, you can say we have a favor. And number three, we have an order. The language is the same every time. If we were to look in the Quran and we see رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً, our Lord, give us in this life good. Now someone might think this is a command. The person who is speaking is asking the person who is listening, commanding them, give me good. And if you were to say that, you would be wholly wrong. Okay? Because the person who is speaking is at a lower level than the person who is listening. So this is understanding your context. Your context needs to be understood when you analyze the speech. Otherwise, you'll misunderstand everything. Now, this framework, this was just a small example from an ocean of examples which we're going to be discussing. And this framework that we're going to look at comes under the science of balagha. Comes under the science of balagha. And I'll write that down in the box. It's very, very important. In fact, it's so important. This is the third most common science which is studied within the Arabic language after Nahu, which is grammar, and Sarf, which is morphology. It comes Balagha, which is often known as Arabic rhetoric or eloquence. And the classical Arabs were masters at this. The language was very, very powerful. And it's amazing how the language became so powerful. So 1500 years ago, what do we have? The historical situation was that you had some of the major superpowers like the Persians, and you had the Romans, and then you had the Jaziratul Arab. You had the Arabian Peninsula, and the Persians, they grew in their luxuries and their huge kind of buildings, and their civilization was quite advanced. And you had the Romans with their courts and theaters and armies and their campaigns, and these were two huge massive superpowers. But then you had these Arabs living in the middle of the desert, okay, eating dates, drinking camel milk, living a Bedouin life, moving from watering hole to watering hole, trading with other Arab countries. Yet their language became so powerful. It's often said that there's over 250 million words, vocabulary words in the Arabic language, and people's language was so powerful that someone could go up to a simple farmer in the field and recite to him some poetry, and then that farmer would continue the poem in response to what he had just heard and end on the same word that the person had started with. And this was just very normal. That they had such powerful language. That language and poetry was in their blood, was in their culture. And it's interesting that the word Arab means that those people who could express themselves clearly, and the opposite of that was the word Ajam. Ajam means those people who can't express themselves clearly, and the word Ajam also means beasts. If you can't express yourself clearly, you're basically just like an animal, just a few grunts and a few noises and sounds here and there, but you didn't have the power of expression that we did. And what made their language powerful was this balagha, this ability to convey this meaning, that what was in your heart, into the mind of the other person. Okay, I'm feeling a particular emotion. I want to say something. How do I express that emotion as clearly as possible? So I'll ask anybody who's listening. So, for example, and this doesn't have to be true or false. You could just humour me. But many of you are sitting at home in isolation, and many of you might be feeling a little bit bored. Okay, if you can comment and express that feeling of boredom to me in the box, I'd be very interested to hear how you're going to express that. Okay, so you want to make me feel like you're feeling now. What's the best way to convey that feeling so that I understand, wow, Fahim is feeling like this, or Mahmoud is feeling like this, or whoever is feeling like this. Express that feeling in your heart in such a way that I truly feel the way that you're feeling. And if you think about it, many of you might find it very challenging to do that. Okay, you might be thinking, wow, I know how to say, yeah, I'm bored. Oh my God, Isa, that's let's hope that improves, inshallah. Okay, so Isa, he used two words. Okay. But am I feeling what you're feeling? No, I'm getting an idea of what's in your heart, but I'm not feeling what you're feeling. Okay? You need to convince me. You need to help me to fully understand what is going through your mind and heart. Okay? How do you do that? Isa might, okay, he knows what he's feeling in his heart, but he doesn't know how to express that. And there are ways and means which we're going to be discussing over the next few weeks, inshallah, or many weeks, as long as this isolation continues. We're going to be discussing lots of different ideas on how you can do that. Okay. Inshallah, Isa, get better. All right. So this idea of balagha, we know, comes from the root verb balagha. Balagha means to reach. Okay, you would say balagtu hadafi, I reached my goal. Now, why does balagha mean that? Because balagha means uh, to reach an intended objective, okay, which is I want to convey my feelings into your heart. Those feelings which are in my heart, I want to convey them into your heart. That's what balagha is. Balagha is that framework, that wasila, that thing which is going to allow me to convey those feelings, all those expressions and techniques and styles. That is balagha, which will help me convey my feelings to you. And this is very, very important. Okay, a very common example is in Arabic poetry, and we're going to be looking a lot at Arabic poetry because really, whenever you want to understand a language, understand this, everyone. When you want to understand the language, what do you look? Where do you look? You don't look in your local tabloids. You don't look in the comics. You don't look in your trash TV. Where do you look? You look at Wordsworth. You look at Shakespeare, you look at Dickens, you look at the best expression of the language. If you want to learn a language to its highest degree, you look at the best expression of that language. So likewise, if you want to understand the Quran, you have to look at what was the best expression of that language at the time that the Quran was revealed, because the Quran is very clear to people who understand the language. However, we do not understand that language, so we have to understand the certain expressions which were used at that time, and those expressions are preserved in classical Arabic poetry. Okay, there's a very particular time frame. What do I mean by Arabic? I don't mean the Arabic that your Egyptian friend speaks. I don't mean the Arabic that your Syrian friend speaks. I don't mean the Arabic that your Tunisian friend speaks. In fact, some of you might even, you know, challenge whether that's even Arabic or not. But that Arabic, which was spoken and written and orated within a particular time period of classical Arabic life, and that was, many of the scholars say, is called the period of Istidlal, 150 years before Hijrah, 150 years after Hijrah. Very, very important time period, because anything in that time period, anything amongst the major Arab tribes was considered proof that this is how the language should be. And so we'll take a lot of examples from poetry from that. Now, when we look at that poetry, we look at those expressions, because expressions differ from time to time. Expressions differ from time to time, from place to place. Just think about it. Everyone, all of you on Facebook, some of your friends in Scotland, down to some of your friends in London, you know, for the same thing, you'll use different words. For the same expression, you'll use different phrases. For the same, you know, idea, you'll express it in different ways, and you're from the same country in the same time. Now, imagine us, we're from a different country, from a different time, we're trying to understand a language which was revealed in the Arabian Peninsula 1500 years ago. Very difficult. So how do we do it? We need a framework to understand language, and we need a reference point. The reference point is always going to be classical Arabic poetry, and the framework is the science of balagha. This will allow us to break down the Quranic style and the language, and also, most importantly, understand what is our Lord trying to tell us. Is our Lord commanding us to do something? Is he advising us to do something? Is he prohibiting us from doing something? If he's commanding us, is he commanding us right now? Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Aqimus salah, establish the prayer. Alright, we have to pray. But is he saying you have to pray right now? Or what's he saying? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't do this, is he saying don't do this straight away? Or don't do this in a little while? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to do something, is it a command or is it a request? What is he asking of us? How do we understand this? Okay, how do we analyze this? I'll give you a very, very clear example. If I said to you, Mahmoud, this session started at 8:30 p.m. What time do you call this? And if Mahmoud was to respond, Brother Akhlaq, it's 8:53. Has he understood what I'm trying to tell him? Mahmoud, have you understood what I was trying to tell you? If I said to you, Mahmoud, what time do you call this? What am I asking? What am I really asking? Someone might say, well, you know, Brother Akhlaq, you're asking a question. And so the question is, what time is this? The time is 8:53. But another person who studied Balagha will say, well, actually, he's not really asking the question. He's making a point to say that Mahmoud was late to the class. So then the question you might ask is, why not just say that? Why not just say, Mahmoud, you're late to the class? Why word something in a particular way? Because sometimes you have a message you want to say, but to say it one way is more powerful than to say it another way. To say it one way is more powerful and more moving in the heart of the listener than to say it another way. And again, this is under the science of balagha. Why say something one way and not the other way? Why word something one way and not the other way? Why choose a particular word over another word? Why choose a particular expression over another expression? For example, I could say, oh, it was sunny today. Or I could say, the day was like, the day was warm with a summer's breeze, and the sky was clear and the birds were singing. I said exactly the same thing. I said two different ways. One way was very expressive, sharing feelings and emotions, painting a picture in your mind. The other way was very factual. It was sunny today. Okay? Which way sticks in your heart and mind? Well, an argument could be made both ways are very good. Depends upon who you're speaking to and the context and the time and the situation. Okay? The Arabs say, لِكُلِّ مَقَامٍ مَقَال. لِكُلِّ مَقَامٍ maqal. For every particular situation, there's a phrase or a speech or an expression which is appropriate at that particular time. At that particular time. Then the question is, how do we form these expressions? How do we form these expressions? The definition of so the true definition of balagha, and there's a really really long technical language, is to choose the perfect words for the given context, expressed in the most beautiful way to reach and have the intended effect on the listener. Okay? توصيل المعنى واضحا بعبارة صحيحة فصيحة لها في النفس أثر جميل مع مناسبة كل كلام للموقف الذي يقال فيه والأشخاص الذين يخاطبون به. Okay? To use the perfect word according to your context, expressed in the most perfect of ways to reach and have the intended effect on the heart and the mind of the listener. Right? And the Quran is perfect at this. The Quran says everything exactly as it intends to say it. So then the question we need to ask ourselves is, number one, who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to? Why is he speaking to them? What is his intent when he's speaking to them? What is the choice of expression, the choice of words? How does that add to the meaning? And when we understand all of these things, we understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's message clearly. Much more clearly than we did before. Much more clearly than we did before. And I will end on just one very, very clear example so that it really, really kind of hits home. Okay, so I'm going to say to you, for example, I went outside and the people were just scattered around. Okay, so if you ever go to the park and you go and there's people scattered around, I know what you're saying. You know what you're saying. You can see it in your mind. Okay, people are scattered around. However, I can also word it like this: يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث. يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث. On a day when people will be like scattered moth. Okay. On a day when people will be like scattered moth. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created a very stark image in your mind. And he's done it by comparing two things to each other. He's comparing, number one, the people. And he's saying that he could have said the people will be dotted around. The people could be scattered around. But now he's saying, if you imagine a whole load of moths in a room, all scattered and fluttering around, the people will be like that. And if you close your eyes, you can visualize exactly what the moth will be like. And then you can visualize what all of mankind would be like. And this is going to create a much more powerful effect in your mind. Rather than just saying, people on that day will be scattered. It doesn't have the same effect. So this was one example. It's called a simile. And similes are used very, very often in the Quran. So my dear brothers and sisters, we've looked at this framework of what of balagha. We've looked at what balagha is, and I cannot wait every Monday to share with you these different styles and techniques which are in the Quran, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes his language very powerful so that it hits home. And we'll look at examples of why that language is powerful, what does it mean on a deeper meaning. And I'm hoping, inshallah, you can use these techniques to make your own language powerful and to convince people when they need convincing, to challenge people when they need challenging, and to express yourself to those people who deserve to feel what you're feeling and have those same emotions that you have when you want to share that. And a very, very common usage of this is in love poetry, when the husband expresses his love and his feelings to his beloved. How do you do that? And I think in today's time, especially for the brothers, these things are very, very important. You need to learn how to do these things, inshallah. And we'll look at lots of examples on a week by week basis, inshallah. Okay, my dear brothers and sisters, it's been a good session. This has been our first session, and it will be first of many sessions. So I look forward to seeing you all next Monday. Jazakallah khair, Saheed, Mahmoud, Fahim, everyone who joined in, and I'll see you next week. Jazakallah khair, wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum.